Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode, I am going to be talking about my thoughts on what is the hardest part about being a medical coder. So, if you're brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue, I'm a medical coder. I have been a medical coder since 2008. And in my time, I have seen a lot. I have experienced a lot. And so these thoughts today are what I think is the hardest part about being a medical coder, which is this: our knowledge, proving our knowledge base, and constantly having to learn. There is something that I say, and I say this quite often, which is we have to know what doctors know while never having gone to medical school. This could not be more true of our profession. So think about this. We have to be able to interpret this documentation that has these huge words on there, and it's really confusing sometimes. And we have to know medical terminology. We have to know anatomy and pathophysiology and physiology. So we have to understand how the body works and the disease process. And we have to know this for thousands of different diagnoses. Now, if you're just getting into this field and you have no experience, no background in medical, it's fine. This is something that we learn through time and through dedication of developing ourselves as medical coders, because there's really nobody to kind of hold your hand through this process. This is a self-propelled process. A lot of times you'll see, even on the job postings, it'll say that the candidate must be a self-starter. And that is true, because a lot of what we do is independent research, working independently, and starting on our own. And so a lot of things I share on my channel is because I didn't have this coming up throughout my career. Okay, I didn't have somebody on YouTube to watch to say, hey, this is the real deal. This is what I've experienced. I didn't have none of that. Okay, so in 2008, I was kind of like going through it on my own. I actually started the school in 2007, and I took my test in 2008. So that is when I really got running and going. But knowing this, we have to be able to prove our knowledge, not just to the providers that we work with, but to our other colleagues. And in this industry and in my time, being a medical coder, I've had to have these talks with either my boss or with an auditor or with other coders, and the question is, okay, so if you see it this way, why do you see it this way? And sometimes it'll be, well, you may see it this way, but we've always done it this way. The thing about being a medical coder is you have to be able to follow those rules, and the rules dictate to us what we do and how we do things and what the process is. So knowing these and still keeping up with knowing how to interpret this documentation by understanding actually the process of these diseases or these conditions is what is going to help us to become really good, high caliber medical coders. Because that is the name of the game. You have to get good at what you do. It's not just about, oh, I'm assigning these codes and they're coded correctly. Did you get all the detail out of that documentation? Did you pick up the highest specificity by looking through the documentation and seeing what is most specific about this? So that's something that you need to think about. And I think that I would say is the hardest part, because now you're having to defend yourself against other colleagues, and then you have to defend yourself against providers, and sometimes providers who will dismiss you. And I don't say this to scare people. Please don't be scared by what I say, okay? That what I say is meant to prepare you, okay? That you gotta know, okay? When it comes to working with your providers, sometimes providers will take that, well, I've been to medical school, I don't have to listen to you. No, but I do know the rules. I do know the rules, and I do understand what it is that we're looking for and what it is that is going to show that your documentation is going to be compliant, because nobody thinks like each individual person. Everybody has their own unique way of thinking. And so while a provider may write something in a particular way, it doesn't necessarily mean that it translates into the codes that they want. So that is why Working with your providers and being very communicative with them is key. I talk about communication with providers all the time. When you're talking to them, when you're working with them, you guys are teammates. And they need to see that you are really trying to learn everything about this disease process as well. Because if they're having to explain things constantly to you, it is going to weigh them down, and it is going to make them not want to even listen to you or not even want to work with you. If you are showing them that you have the initiative and saying, Dr. George, right? Dr. George, I see that this is the disease process, or this is what this means, but I don't quite understand what you're saying in this documentation. Can you please explain it? That is a way of, okay, they've already done their research. Let me go ahead and break it down for them, and so that way that they can get this. Okay, cool. And that way they're like, okay, this is a person that is trying to work with me. Because nobody can be expected to know what a doctor knows, right? But we can really try. We can try to up our game and up our knowledge base. And sometimes people don't think about those things. Or this wasn't told to them when they were in school. They were told when they went to school that they could just use an encoder when they got out, and everything would be easy and everything would be good. And that's just not the case, folks. You really have to be able to understand this documentation. And this is why I tell people, even people who English is their second language, that I know it's difficult, but it doesn't mean that you can't really try to dig deep and understand what is actually happening with this stuff. Because even us as English speakers, sometimes it's hard for us to understand. I tell you, I've been in the orthopedic clinic for the last few years, and sometimes there are things on there that confuse me. So I'll have to sit there and do my research. I'll stop what I'm doing and do my research. And if it still doesn't make sense to me, if going through all of the resources that I have, the Merck manual, orthoinfo.org, or even going through the coding companion, if none of those can help me to understand what's actually happening, I have to get up and I have to go to my provider and see if I can grab somebody and get them to explain this to me, because I'll tell them, I've seen this, I read this, I saw this video, and it still is not clicking. And then they'll explain it, and I'm like, oh, now I got it. So that's all it is, guys. And I say that that's the hardest part, is building that knowledge base. And then, making sure that you match your knowledge with your skill and the speed of how you're coding and everything. So that is the most important thing in our industry, is somebody that actually understands the knowledge of the medical terminology and the disease process. That's why they say nurses, when they transition over, that it's a good thing. But it doesn't always mean that they're going to understand the coding side of the house. Coding is a whole different animal by itself. This thing is something that you have to think differently when it comes to medical coding. And so there's a lot of things that go hand in hand with this. And this is the hardest part, is that knowledge. But once you get it, where you know how to do your research, you know what websites to use, you know what books to use, you know what parts of the manual to go into that will help you, it's going to make things a lot easier. But you can't run from it. I get letters all the time from people who write me and say, Bleu, I'm in medical terminology right now, or I'm in anatomy and physiology, and I don't know if I can do this. You are barely in the first part of your program. You shouldn't be getting discouraged at this point. Get discouraged later on when you have a lot of things that you're trying to learn all at one time. Then yeah, it gets overwhelming. But the overwhelming part shouldn't be at your base foundation, which is that medical terminology, anatomy, and patho, because that's going to lay the good foundation. And once you get out there and you start having to build your knowledge base, it's going to be a lot easier for you to build that knowledge base, because you already have a good foundation. It's all about building and taking the time to research and study. Because even me, I still study. And as much as I got going on, I've got the 2 channels, I've got YouTube, and I got Patreon, okay? Patreon, if you don't know, is a lot like YouTube, but on Patreon, I talk more about myself personally, and I also do critical thinking exercises for medical coding. I also do anatomy and pathophysiology, like word puzzles and things like that, crossword puzzles, word searches, and that kind of thing to help with the learning process. And I do those things on Patreon. And so doing those things, I know it helps other people, and it also helps me as I create this stuff. But doing this and taking the time, not only for the channels, and not only for work, because I work a full-time job, I work 40 hours a week, and I still manage to squeeze time in to study. Now, it may not be the same amount every week. Some weeks it's 10 hours of my own personal time. Some weeks it's 20 hours. It depends on what is all going on. But I still devote that time. I watched a video, Dr. Antonio Webb. He is a orthopedic surgeon who has his own YouTube channel. I highly recommend it. I will leave his link for his channel in the description box below. But he talks about still needing to study even after all the years that he's been in school. He spent 14 years in school, right? Just to become a doctor. And during that time, he still, to this day, has to study. He's pulling out the book and studying and reading and looking at the anatomy and looking at watching videos and things like that. So, I mean, that is a dedication. And if a doctor has to do that, think about what a medical coder has to do. So that is something that you really need to consider when you're getting into this field, or even when you're into this field and you feel lost and you don't know and don't understand. If you feel lost and you don't understand, it's because you need to do more studying. Well, Blue, what do I need to study? Your anatomy, your medical terminology, and there's lots of really good videos. There's a video that Dr. Antonio Webb suggests on his videos. So I put it in, that is going to be in the description box of the video. So that way you guys can check it out. But it is about dissections and things like that on anatomy. So it is really good, and it's very helpful, because even I didn't understand. This is going to make y'all laugh. So with nerves, right? Your nerves. I'm thinking in my head, nerves are like neurons and they just move throughout the body. Actually, nerves are cords. They're the way they look, they're like cords, and they're all throughout the body, right? And you see them, because you've seen the charts for it, but actually seeing it when it's there and it's dissected, I'm like, I didn't know if that's what it looked like. So that's something that I just learned. And I learned by looking on that video that Dr. Webb had suggested. So I really do recommend watching those, listening to them, and taking the time to just listen to them. Building your knowledge base by doing fun things like that is going to help you, even if you're just listening to it. Because I'm telling you guys what, when you do these things, it's going to make the whole process for you a lot easier. And it's going to make it a lot more quicker for you to understand and when you're reading this stuff. So at least that's just my opinion on it. But yes, that is the hardest part, is building your knowledge base and then proving yourself and proving your knowledge to those that are around you, either your coworkers or the providers that you work with. But it is a process. So don't be impatient with it, okay? It is a marathon. It is not a sprint. I say that all the time when it comes to medical coding. It is a marathon. It is not a sprint. Think about this. I've been coding since 2008, and I'm still trying to learn. I'm still trying to understand everything that I can. And it's not just about the coding. It's about the disease process as well. So in anatomy, I'm still trying to understand that. And there's new things that I'm learning every week. And I do that because it's a commitment that I've made to myself. And I enjoy it. It is an enjoyable venture for me. It is not work. I say it all the time too. Medical coding is not work to me. Working with my channels is not work to me. Because it is all part of the things that I love. And I try to share that with you all every week as I give you new episodes 5 days a week talking about medical coding and the career of medical coding. You know, I do have coding tip videos out there. If you look through my videos, you'll see those. I talk about the industry a lot because there's things that are out there that people say, and they say things for self-serving reasons. I have nothing to sell you guys, so that's why I share this information with you. So at least that's just what I wanted to say today. But yes, so I hope that this helps you. Everybody has a different opinion about what the hardest part about being a medical coder is, but I would have to say building that knowledge base, improving your knowledge would be the hardest part. But it is not the part that should make you run from this. I'm just saying. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this one up. Please like if you haven't already, and subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these episodes. And I will see y'all on the next episode. Bye.